The romance of the age of sail, of grand adventures and the freedom of the open ocean, is a beautiful lie. In reality, the greatest enemy a sailor faced wasn't a storm or an enemy cannon. It was the very ship he called home. Forget everything you think you know about life on the high seas. We're going to take you through a single, real day in the life of a sailor during the age of sail. A day filled with filth, pain, and constant, gnawing fear. The question is, could you have survived until sunset? The day begins before dawn, not with the gentle rays of sun, but with the shrill blast of the boatswain's whistle and the roar of his mates. All hands on deck, show a leg. You don't wake up in a private cabin. You awaken in the 'tween decks, a dark, suffocating space with less than 5 feet of headroom. You're one of up to hundreds of men crammed into this floating slum. The air itself is an assault on the senses. It's a foul cocktail of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, vomit, bilge water, and the ammonia-like stench from the animal pens and the ship's rats. Privacy is a forgotten luxury. Your hammock is slung just inches from your neighbors. The damp from the sea seeps into everything: your clothes, your bedding, your very bones. You are never truly dry. And you are not alone. Lice and fleas are a simple reality of everyday life, constant, blood-sucking companions you can never truly get rid of. Old sailors used to say that if you boiled your shirt, the seams would walk away on their own. Breakfast is next. There are no fresh fruits or warm bread. You are handed a piece of hardtack, also known as a sea biscuit. It's a simple flour, water, and salt cracker, baked until it is hard as a rock to prevent spoilage. It's so hard, it's notorious for breaking teeth. But the real horror is what's inside. These biscuits were often infested with maggots and black-headed weevils. Sailors developed a grim routine. They would tap the biscuit on the table in the dark, hoping the insects would fall out before they took a bite. As the old saying went, it's better to eat the weevils than to eat no biscuit at all. Once on deck, the real work begins, and it is brutally physical. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your hands, raw and blistered, haul on thick, tarred ropes until your muscles scream. You scrub decks, repair sails, and maintain the complex web of rigging that powers the ship. This work is dangerous on a calm day. A swinging boom could knock you unconscious and overboard in a second. A snapped rope under tension could slice a man in two. But in a storm, the ship becomes a death trap. Imagine being ordered to climb the masts, sometimes over 100 feet into a raging tempest. The ropes are slick with ice, your fingers are numb with cold, and the wind threatens to tear you from your perch and fling you into the churning black ocean below. A fall meant certain death. No one would risk a rescue in such conditions. You were simply gone. Yet a storm was almost preferable to its opposite, the doldrums. Weeks of dead calm, with no wind to fill the sails. The ship would sit motionless on a glassy sea under a relentless, burning sun. With no shade and no escape, water rations would be cut, food would spoil faster in the heat, and desperation would begin to boil among the crew, sometimes leading to mutiny. Overseeing this entire operation was the captain, who held the power of an absolute monarch. His word was law, and discipline was maintained through organized, brutal violence. Any infraction, laziness, a moment of defiance, a poorly tied knot, could earn you a flogging. The instrument of punishment was the infamous Cat O' tails. This was not a simple whip. It was a handle with 9 knotted cords of leather, sometimes with pieces of metal woven into the ends. A dozen lashes could strip the flesh from a man's back, leaving him a bloody, shredded mess. To prevent infection, The ship's surgeon would then rub coarse salt or salt water into the open wounds, a process called salting that caused unimaginable agony. For more serious crimes, there were even worse fates. A sailor might be keel-hauled, dragged by a rope under the ship's hull, where the sharp barnacles would tear his body to ribbons as he drowned. The midday meal offered little comfort. The main source of protein was salted meat, pork or beef, packed in barrels of brine. After months at sea, this meat would be rock-hard, slimy, and sometimes green with decay. The water served alongside it was just as bad, stored for months in wooden casks where it grew stagnant and foul, teeming with green slime and insect larvae. The water was so disgusting that sailors were given a daily ration of alcohol, beer, or more famously, grog, simply to make it palatable and kill some of the germs. But this miserable diet of processed, preserved food created a far more terrifying threat than starvation. It unleashed the single greatest killer of the age of sail: scurvy. For centuries, this disease was a terrifying mystery. It killed more sailors than all naval battles, storms, and shipwrecks combined. Ship owners considered it a normal cost of doing business, often planning for a 50% death rate on long voyages. It began subtly, with extreme lethargy and aching joints. A captain might mistake these first symptoms for laziness and punish an already dying man. Then, the true horror would unfold. Your gums would become spongy and purple, swelling over your teeth. Your teeth would loosen and fall out. Old wounds would mysteriously reopen. You'd suffer terrifying hallucinations, before finally, internal bleeding would finish you off. In 1747, a Scottish doctor named James Lind conducted one of the first clinical trials in history. He took 12 sailors suffering from scurvy and gave different groups different supposed cures. The 2 men given citrus fruits, oranges and lemons, made a miraculous recovery within days. The cure was found: a simple lack of vitamin C. And yet, in a tragic display of bureaucracy, it took the British Royal Navy nearly 50 years to make lemon juice a standard issue ration for all its sailors. Millions had died from a completely preventable condition. And scurvy was just one of many threats. The crowded, filthy conditions turned the ship into a floating petri dish. Dysentery, typhus, and smallpox could sweep through a crew like wildfire, with no place to quarantine the sick and no real medicine to treat them. A simple cut could lead to gangrene, and the only solution was amputation, with a saw, without anesthetic. Your chances of surviving the subsequent infection were slim. If you survived the day's work, the evening offered a brief respite. In these precious hours of free time, the human spirit flickered to life. Men would gather to sing sea shanties, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of the waves. They would gamble with dice carved from bone, tell stories of home, or play fiddles and whistles. It was in these moments that the floating prison felt almost like a community. But this peace was fragile. The boredom, the frustration, and the constant irritation of living in such close quarters often boiled over into violence. These were not gentle men. They were hard-drinking and rough, quick to take offense. Disagreements over a card game or a simple insult could easily escalate into a brutal fight with knives. And beneath it all lay the psychological weight of fear. Every shadow on the horizon brought the threat of attack, be it from a hostile navy or a ruthless pirate. This constant anxiety gave rise to deep-seated superstitions. Sailors believed whistling on deck could summon a storm, that seeing an albatross was a terrible omen, and that having a woman on board was the worst luck of all. These rituals were a desperate attempt to gain some small measure of control over a life dictated by chaos and chance. As you lie in your hammock, listening to the groaning of the ship's timbers, you might ask the most important question of all. Why would anyone choose this life? The horrifying answer is, most of them didn't. Many nations, particularly Britain, relied on a system of forced recruitment known as impressment. Groups of men, called press gangs, were legally authorized to roam port cities and kidnap able-bodied men for naval service. They would patrol taverns, beat men into submission with clubs, and drag them, kicking and screaming, onto a ship. Others were tricked, plied with alcohol until they drunkenly signed a contract they couldn't read. It's estimated that on many naval ships, as much as half of the crew were pressed men, essentially captives serving against their will. For those who did volunteer, it was rarely a choice made out of a desire for adventure. It was a choice born of desperation. On land, they faced crushing poverty, starvation, or the terrifying prospect of a debtor's prison. A life at sea, however terrible, was seen as the lesser of two evils. It was not an escape to freedom, it was an escape from one hell into another. The unnamed sacrifices and inhuman suffering of these millions of men became the foundation upon which mighty empires were built. Their brutalized labor was the engine that drove global trade and connected the world. That is the stark truth hidden behind the romance of the Age of Sail. If you found this journey into the past insightful, please consider supporting our channel with a like. We'd be honored to read your thoughts in the comments below. What fact about a sailor's life surprised you the most? Subscribe and join us for more deep dives into the stories that history almost forgot. Thank you for watching.